All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining our SEMA Committee Council virtual education with an extremely important topic for every organization, building a high performance team. My name is Melissa Parker-Boudreaux. I'm the Senior Sales and Marketing Manager for Oracle Lighting, an SBN committee member, and recently honored with She is SEMA Woman of the Year for 2023. Today, we have a full house of panelists joining us to speak on a topic that they believe brings high value to their organization. We have Colby McLaughlin, serves as the president and managing partner for Trim Illusion and Land to Sky Holdings. He is also currently serving as a board member on the SEMA PAC, SEMA Cares, and his term as chair of SEMA Pro. Colby started his career in the OEM prototype segment, working on notable builds. After 7 years in the OEM space, he went back to his passion in the aftermarket as the national sales manager of a direct-to-dealer distributor, Chrome Enhancements. Colby started his position at Trim Illusion in 2018 and is now the premier solution for chrome deletes, including snap-on grills, overlay windowsill trim, snap-on door handles, wheel skins, and other exterior products. Outside of business, he enjoys exploring the outdoors with his 2 dogs and vacationing in the Caribbean with his wife, where they both look to retire one day. We also have Matt Beenen, who is the founder and president of both Built Right Industries and Mount Tech USA. Both businesses specialize in the design and manufacturing of innovative organization and gear mounting solutions for automotive, marine, and military applications. Matt's current projects include the scaling of in-house manufacturing capacity and product collaboration with other like-minded businesses. Matt is currently serving as the Future Leaders Network chair and is passionate about helping other engineers and innovators bring their ideas to life. Outside of work, Matt spends time with his wife and 2 girls, Hallie and Clara. We also have Joanna Shere, President and CEO of Steel Rubber Products, a manufacturer of restoration products for classic cars, street rods, RVs, recreational boating. Starting in 2005, working in the marketing department, she also served as sales manager, senior marketing manager, and vice president before becoming president in 2020, right after the beginning of COVID. Joanna volunteers on the Automotive Restoration Market Organization Select Committee of SEMA, serving as chair-elect. She's very interested in education and leadership development, whether that is through students preparing for a career or adults growing their skills through continual education. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with her friends and family and traveling. She lives in Denver, North Carolina with her husband, David, and their dog, Dexter. All right, so everyone here today is interested in learning about how to build a high-performing team. But before we jump in on a how-to from our panelists, let's get an idea of you. So we're going to start by popping up some polls here, and we want you to answer as quickly and honestly as possible, and so we can understand you and your business. So poll number 1, what size is your organization? So small to large organizations, we'd like to hear from you. All right, let's see. So looking at the feedback from everybody, it looks like we have 45% is 100 plus employees. So a majority here have larger organizations. Right behind that, it's about 20 to 50 employees. Excellent, good to know. All right, so poll number 2, do you believe you currently have a high performing team or teams within your organization? This gives us an idea of how you'd like to structure this. It gives our panelists an idea of where you currently sit with your high-performing teams, and if you have them. All right, let's see. So you can answer yes, no, somewhat, or unsure. So about, it's kind of even. 45% say yes, they have some high-performing teams. 45% say somewhat, and we have about 10% say no. Interesting, okay. Good feedback for our panelists. And last poll for you. Are you interested in building a high-performance team, or are you learning how to become a high performer? So this gives us an idea of if you are looking to help your organization or you yourself looking to become a high performer, or if you just want to learn more. So answer those as quickly as possible, then we can turn it over to our panelists. All right, let's see if we can get those results. Ooh, okay. 64% are interested in building a high performance team. 45% want to learn more. And about 18% want to be a high performer themselves. So, all right, that gives us a good sliding scale there of how to proceed. So let's talk about the hiring process. So normally we believe that the hiring process is the first step to finding these high performers, or shining stars, as I like to call them. However, we can start prior to the interviewing process to ensure we find an ideal candidate to fit within our organization. So turning it to my panelists here, how can you prepare prior to interviewing to ensure you pick the right person? So we're going to start with you, Matt, and let us know more.
Sure. So for us, we talk about company culture. A lot of people talk about company culture. What that means for us is we have established core values that are not who we want to be, but who we are, who got us here today. And we basically, our intention is to get the right people into the right seats. And so to find the right people, we're looking for people we know if a person fits those core values, that's probably the right kind of cultural fit. And then to get them into the right seat, we're evaluating, and we have a system of evaluating if a person understands the job, if they seem to want the job, and if we think that they have the capacity to be able to do that job. So really for us, the quick answer is that it starts with our core values.
Awesome. Agreed. That's the basis. Joanna, do you want to add to how you prepare prior to interviewing to finding the right candidate?
Sure. Prior to interview is tough. You're talking about before people even apply for the job, right? And so one of the things that I think is very important is you have a very clear job description out there in the market, so you even have the right people apply for the role. And that's not only what you have out there for a job opening, but how you show yourself in social media and stuff. We're a fun industry, and we like to have people that want to embrace that. And we do a lot of things with our own social media so that when an opening comes open, people will say, wow, they do all these great things. And we get candidates that are excited to be part of it. And so I think it starts before you ever even put out a posting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. It's the first thing people are going to look at, right? Is your social media and see who they're applying for. All right. So Colby, ending it with you. How do you prepare prior to interviewing to ensure you really find that right person?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that I like to do is there's a really good book out there called The E-Myth Revisited that I'm sure a lot of people have written by Michael Gerber. And a lot of that is knowing what role you're trying to fill, as Matt said, not just hiring the right person, but hiring the right person for the right position. So you really have to know what position you need to fill. You need to understand it inside and out so that you can create that job. But historically for us, we've hired, whether at Trim or before that at other employers, I've hired a lot off of word of mouth. One, because you're going to know that person better. So whether they went to church with somebody or school with somebody, you're going to know if they have the integrity of the person that we're looking for. And if they have what we consider gas, give something, whatever you want to fill in there. And because we cross-train and promote so much internally, before we even look to hire somebody, we look at our own team to say, hey, does somebody want to take on more? Does somebody want to grow within the business? Because then we'll train them to take that position on and then them fill their position from behind. So that's an important part of our culture.
Excellent. That's awesome. And do you guys offer any initiatives for people that make suggestions for other candidates for you internally?
Yes, absolutely. We all have to work together. There's a lot of mutual trust within our business, and so we take that seriously. So even if it's an interview process, I don't want to be the only person with ownership of bringing somebody on that team. So if there's another team person that would be working close with that person, we want them involved and accountable in that interviewing process.
Awesome. Excellent. And is there a proven process to determine how these potential employees will fit within your culture? What have you used in the past historically? We'll start with Colby again.
Yeah, we look for integrity. For me, it's integrity first, profit second, because without integrity, you're not going to have profits within the business. And so we want to make sure somebody cares even outside of work, how they present themselves. So that's a big thing. And as going back to our work environment requiring that mutual trust, so many of us are remote, so we have to be able to trust that that person, even without the office organization, is gonna step up and do the right thing within the position. So for us, as far as tools, we use Slack often. Sometimes it can be noise, but again, being that we're so remote, having that communication, being able to make decisions on the fly is really important for us. And then as far as an ERP, we use Odoo. So that's where all of our inventory and financials are. So that allows us to all stay accountable to what our roles are within the position, making sure that we're hitting our KPIs.
Excellent. Okay, Matt, what is your proven process to determine how these potential employees will fit within your culture?
Sure. So we, I mentioned core values before, and I'll kind of circle back on that a little bit. Colby mentioned integrity. We understand that every business is different, and whatever your core values are might be different. And so we're looking for a core values fit. And if there's not a fit, it's not to say that it's a bad employee or a bad person. It's just not right, not the right alignment for us. So what we'll typically do is we'll have team members or other members of our leadership team have kind of an informal interview with that candidate, depending on the level of the position, with no intention of evaluating their ability to do the job, but just to understand, is this person, to use Colby's example, does this person seem like they have integrity? And kind of make that assessment. If a person doesn't pass sort of that litmus test, that question, do they fit our core values? Then we don't even discuss capability or capacity any further. If they do pass, then we kind of evaluate, does the person understand the job? Do they want it? And do we think they can do it? So that's kind of the two-step process that we lean on.
Awesome. Interesting. Joanna, anything to add to your proven process?
I don't know if it's proven. I mean, just reality. We've all had a bad hire here or there. And we're very fortunate with our company. We have a lot of long-term tenure, which says a lot about our culture. So we don't hire very often because you practically have to wait for someone to die before an opening comes in our company. That being said, we do have some openings in 2024. And one of the things we do try to do, of course, everyone, is behavioral questions. One of the tools we're anticipating trying in 2024 is something called the Culture Index, which is a tool that matches people to the culture of your company, and you work with a group that sets that up so that you can have a little bit more intelligence there with your candidate, someone that gets a little further down the road with you if they are going to be a fit, because interviews are tough. There's a lot of times when people will tell you what you want to hear and everything looks great on paper, and then you actually get them in and it doesn't quite jive. And so trying to eliminate that situation, and so that's why we're looking at that tool.
Right. Yeah, and when you find that you didn't find that right person, that's a lot of time, energy, and let's face it, money that went out the door with that person. So making sure you are in alignment with company values and you really have that core drive that we're looking for is always important, and that starts at the beginning. So great. Thank you for that information on the hiring process. That's been very helpful. High performing teams are aligned in their focus, purpose, and priorities. They set team and individual goals that support the shared vision so that their work drives achievement. Goals are not only aligned, but they are clearly defined so everyone knows exactly what they need to do and how they need to get there. So alignment is extremely important in a high performance team. So we have a couple of questions regarding alignment. Don't forget, you can also drop questions in the chat or in the Q&A as well. We can take those at the end. So tossing this to Joanna first, what are some suggested tips to ensure a team is in alignment? And how do you ensure that they have the same goals and priorities to work together?
Sure. One of the things we do is we have, particularly my senior team, we meet regularly to talk about what our strategic goals are, making sure everything has stayed the same, or did a situation come up that may make us go off in a different direction. We do all say that no comment gives implicit agreement. So your opportunity to speak up is within the meeting. Now, that being said, we won't beat you up if you don't agree with us. We would rather beat it up in the meeting than find out afterwards someone knew we were making a wrong decision and no one said anything about it. We have a very open environment. We take criticism well. I'm very fortunate in that circumstance. We've got a lot of people that speak up and do say if they have concerns about something. And I appreciate that. And that is given, the response to that is given with appreciation. So everyone feels very comfortable speaking up within the organization and touching base. Are we still meeting the goals? Did the goal need to change? Did something occur within the economy, the environment, the logistics structure, whatever that is that may change things? So we just kind of keep on pace, because with culture, it's so important that particularly the leadership is all aligned with one another, because you're driving the truck for the company. You're heading it up. And if we don't have alignment, there's no chance of the rest of the organization following through, because they're just going to think everyone's going all over the place. And how do we follow?
Mm-hmm. Right. Starts at the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Colby, what are some suggested tips to ensure your team's in alignment, and how do you ensure they all have the same goals and are rowing in the same direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things I think that's important even before we look at alignment. Is Harvard Business Review talks a lot about, and especially with the generational differences, that one generation was more income driven. Hey, as long as I'm making the money. And then other personality types, as generations have gone on, people are driven by different things. Some people want public recognition. Some people want private recognition. Some people want awards. Some people don't care about any of that, and they just want it to impact their income. And so identifying your employees, what motivates them, I think is very important. That being said, comp plans will always, in my opinion, drive alignment. If we build comp plans out to where the company needs to go, people's processes and thinking change to get aligned, to make sure that they're aligned together. So whether that's sales or inventory, whatever that may be, AR, if it's driven by that, they will make changes that will positively affect. So we look at what are we trying to accomplish this year, and then look to see, hey, if we throw out some incentives or some bonuses if we achieve these KPIs. And then if we're not hitting those things, it's an easy one-on-one sitting down and showing them, hey, you wanted to make this year, but because these things aren't being accomplished, but look, if you did this is how much money you could make. And you realize that people's mindsets change pretty quickly to make sure that we're all aligned.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. And Matt, how do you ensure alignment within your team for goals and priorities? What tools do you use?
Sure. So kind of on the ground floor, like what Colby was mentioning, we're very KPI driven. We arrive at those KPIs though, kind of starting at a very high level. So like, for example, in our business, if you were to walk in the door and find any employee and ask them, what does Built Right Industries look like in 10 years? Every person in the building would have the same answer, or a version of the same answer. And we find that having that really high level vision, kind of North Star, helps people make decisions on a daily basis that are in alignment with that. So if we're trying to grow to be a very large business, those decisions are different than if we're trying to grow to be a small, really efficient team, whatever it is. So it kind of starts with that like 10-year answer. And then we work our way backwards to where do we have to be in 5 years to get there. And we all agree on that. Where do we have to be in 1 year to get there? We all agree on that. And then that's how we get to that level that Colby was talking about, which is, all right, what are your scorecard metrics? What are your KPIs that we need to hit this year, this quarter even, in order to be feeling like we're on track to that goal? So that is kind of how we create alignment. Everybody kind of buys into that. There's a high level of accountability associated with that. You asked about tools. We use a tool called 90 online. It's like cloud-based. We run on EOS. If anybody else runs on EOS, this is probably starting to sound familiar. But that is how we keep organized, because there's a lot to keep track of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oracle uses EOS as well, and we've found it great success in the last 9 months. So I have to reiterate what Matt said there. And, going into the next question of that shared vision, we talked about culture, but how do you really ensure from the top down, and how is it passed around and it's executed with culture and that shared vision? To you, Matt, first.
Yeah, so I think from the top down, we have a leadership team. There's 5 of us. We meet every week, same time, same place, for 90 minutes. As part of that meeting, we're reviewing our core values and our mission. We're going through these goals that we're talking about, quarterly and yearly goals. And if anybody's off track, we're going to talk about it. So there's kind of a high level of visibility and accountability there. That feeds into our core values, which is kind of, one of them is no ego, no BS. So that kind of is like at a high level, and then that kind of flows down through the organization. So everybody else has their own kind of metrics and things to keep an eye on, that are based on these high level goals and that vision. And what we found is that when those goals are off track, or those scorecard metrics are off track on a consistent basis, we can usually sit down with that person or without them and look at our core values and look at the process, kind of how we got there, and usually can identify what the issue is. And the issue is not typically whatever that scorecard metric is. It might be that person isn't really living, customer journey first, which is another one of our core values. And then it might be a conversation with that person to say, hey, we're out of alignment here a little bit on this particular core value. Is that something we can work on? And then kind of also reviewing it in hindsight. So when we've had employees that have left for one reason or another, or under different circumstances, typically we can look back and with hindsight, we can kind of say, you know what, actually there was an issue with this or that piece of the process, and kind of continually debrief on that stuff is helpful in enforcing how important it is to our business.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. And Joanna, we talked about having that shared vision. How is that important with culture, and how do you ensure that similar focus for all?
I think, one of the things as far as culture and having a shared vision, it drives how you communicate with each other. It drives your strategy. It drives a lot of different things within your organization. And so it's highly part of having a shared vision, because you've got to be able to say ours is, open communication. You got to be able to know that you can discuss each other. It builds trust within the management team. One of the things that we have done is, it's the culture we aspire to be, sometimes not necessarily the culture we are. And so it's a constant process. One of the things that we realized in our organization is we needed to do a better job of communication throughout the organization. I think we were trusting our middle managers to handle some communication that really needed to come from the top down. And with that, we started doing all staff meetings a lot more often, communicating a lot more transparency with some of the numbers with all the staff, so that they knew what was going on, as well as when you don't know, you can make up a story. So why make it up? Let's just go ahead and be very honest with our staff members, and then showing them that we're open and communicative. You can kind of see it peter down through everybody. And so you show it, you display it, and then that behavior happens throughout the organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Excellent. I like the big staff meetings. I think those are important too. And Colby, regarding this shared vision, how important is that? And then how do you make sure from the top down that's executed and spread throughout your organization?
Yeah, so my first mentor allowed me to fail a lot in a safe space. And it's hard, and I struggle with that. I try to do that with our team, and it's not that I don't trust that they can't execute, but I generally am the first to raise my hand to a fault, because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable, if that makes sense. That's my nature, but I know that I'm holding them back from growing. So replicating that, both from the founder of Trimillusion, he's the first one to get into the dumpster to pack it down. He's the first one to grab a broom to sweep. And then going back to my first mentor is creating that safe space for people to take ownership within the organization at all levels, helps them grow. But then it comes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That second tier is that safety and security. So not saying that you're going to have job security because you're with us, but you can feel free to speak out against maybe what everybody else says, like going back to Joanna's point, being able to speak up in a meeting without them feeling that they're going to get punished very important. But for us is allowing that space for people to take on more within the company and grow, come at it with a different perspective. And again, that goes back to the cross training, because they're going to see a position within our business maybe differently than I do, and giving them the ability to be able to take that on. So it's, and then the biggest thing for me too, and I learned this from my first mentor, is open acknowledging as a leader that we're not perfect. We make mistakes, but we acknowledge what those mistakes are or how we learn from them. Because if we as leaders within a team meeting or a one-on-one are able to admit failures or shortcomings that we have, that's going to allow them to then openly be able to admit those things in team meetings, and then we can then drive forward together. So I think as a leader, we have to be able to willingly admit, things that we know that we don't excel at, but that's why we have other people to help us drive that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So along with building a high performing team is accountability. We kind of talked about it a little bit at first, so let's get into the nitty gritty though, because it's crucial to ensure that the team members are held accountable for their actions and contributions. By doing so, you can promote a sense of ownership and responsibility within the group. You track progress regularly, you review your team's progress towards its goals, you're using data and performance metrics to evaluate success. So let's talk through some tools that, everyone can use, and what have you seen work in the past with your team? So starting with Colby, what do you keep your team accountable with, and what tools would you suggest?
Yeah, we used to use Monday.com. We got away from that. We use Google Sheets a lot, setting out timelines and ownership on those Google Sheets. So that's helped drive our business. And again, just like Matt and Joanna mentioned, just clear timelines and accountability to who's going to own something, giving them the ability to. And that's really how we kind of track our initiatives, or within shared drives or whatever that may be. And then, for us, in regards to the accountability of it, and actually I want to add on that last part, there's a really good book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. And he talks about in that book, if you create 10 followers, you now have 10 followers. But if you create 10 leaders, and they create 10 leaders, you now have 100 followers, right? So building that within the organization, but allowing them, again, to take that accountability to own something and drive an initiative forward.
Excellent. Awesome. Good tools to think about. I do love a good Google Sheet, I'll be honest. So Matt, what are tools? You've talked about a couple already, 90 and such, but what are tools that you use to keep your team accountable?
Yeah, sorry, you mentioned 90. We use that as a platform to kind of track all of this. But within our leadership team, we have this meeting every single week. And then within departments, we have a similar little bit kind of abridged version of that meeting. So if we have goals or scorecard metrics, things that are off track, we always talk about them as a group within a department or within a leadership team. And kind of make them everybody's problem. And then we come up with solutions. And if a solution generates hey, Matt, you've got to send this email to so-and-so to kind of initiate a meeting. We even record that, so that there's it's kind of accountability to kind of an extreme level. But we record that. And if next week when we have this meeting, I haven't sent that email, I've got to stand in front of the rest of my leadership team and say, hey, you know what? I dropped the ball on that this week. But I think part of that goes back to what Colby and Joanna mentioned, is that a trust. I'm looking at it here because I just reread it, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. The foundation is trust. So if you have a high level of trust, or like Colby said, kind of vulnerability, everybody feels comfortable sharing when they did or didn't meet something. So there's no incentive when we're talking about accountability. There's no incentive for a person to be dishonest about the status of a project or how something went. And that allows us to use accountability to really make forward progress, as opposed to place blame. So that's kind of how we think about it. And then that weekly meeting pulse can feel like wasted time, because you're kind of, I don't need to hear that Matt didn't send that email. But it breeds this organizational kind of level of accountability that is, I think, pretty unique.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. And Joanna, what tools do you use to keep your team accountable?
We use the ERPs and the CRMs and all the other acronyms out there, for the tools to keep track of things. And the other thing that I use is something actually business coach had taught me, which is kind of how the soft skill method of having people keep themselves accountable with you. And that would be when you have someone that's got a project due to you, you know, what would it take to get it done by Friday? And then they can tell you what's going on, why they can't, or what was, you know, and then that way you know what barriers they're dealing with or what other things maybe you can take off your plate, which is our role as leaders. If something is a priority, is to make sure that those folks have the time and the resources to do what they need to do to finish a priority. And then you agree on a date and a time. And then you always say at the end, you know, if for some reason you are unable to meet the commitment they've agreed to, you will wave the white flag to let me know. And then that way I know about conflicts or issues before it happens versus after the fact. Oh, I didn't make it. Oh, you know, we didn't make the number. That way we can look and see if we need to punt or do something differently before it gets to, it failed before the due date, before the sales number, and we as a group can figure out what it is we need to do to change direction. Or maybe what I asked for was not reasonable, you know, but at least there's a conversation that happens and you don't punish the person for waving the right flag. Now, if the person knows that and then doesn't, then it's not really a punishment, but it's a conversation you need to have and make sure it's understood that that's how you stay accountable. And what happens is after a while, when you say that, they'll come to you with the white flag. They'll, you know, the verbiage even permeates through the organization, you know, and it gives you a good idea of what's on someone's plate if there's something super important that needs to be taken care of, and you can adjust resources, or this is just not important to deal with at the moment, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, so we've talked a lot about different tools today. We've talked about 90, we've talked about Google Sheets and having these meetings. How often would you suggest to have meetings with your team, maybe one-on-one or performance reviews? What is your suggestion? Let's start with Colby. If you could provide some insight on how you run your organization with meetings, that would give some helpful insight.
Yeah, I really think it's specific to the initiative. I think touch bases are very important, but they need to be well thought out and needed. So there may be touch bases on a specific thing that is weekly in the beginning, but we know once we get down the road of that initiative, maybe it turns to bi-weekly or monthly or quarterly. So we look at what the initiative is or what that role position is, and then we'll guide it accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Matt, what is your cadence for one-on-ones or performance reviews?
Yeah, so like Colby mentioned, if it's project or specific based, so there might be kind of a cadence to a project type meeting. As far as like a one-on-one sit down, we typically try and do that quarterly with kind of an overall performance review annually. The quarterly is more like, you know, like talking about kind of how's it going. As far as like immediate feedback, that's something that's happening on a weekly basis in these team meetings. But yeah, quarterly for a one-on-one.
Excellent. Joanna, anything to add there?
I don't do performance reviews. I know that people are either they love that or hate that. And we don't do performance reviews. What I do is a monthly one-to-one, because I think people should know where they sit anyways and not wait till that annual review or whatever that is. I do have a one-to-one sheet that I sometimes use with my reports that talk about things like, what is the most important thing we should be talking about today? What key projects are you currently working on? What isn't working right for you? What's keeping you from making a decision? Of course, I'm managing manager, so it's a little bit different. But I think what I need is a conversation that stimulates, so I know what challenges they are dealing with specifically, and where can I be a support for those managers. And it gets into that kind of stuff. Maybe it's nothing that's going on at work, but I find out they're dealing with a sick parent, and that is challenging them at work, and they're bringing that baggage with them. And it gives us that one-to-one time to understand what's happening and how I can support their efforts in their department.
Mm-hmm. Right. When you think of accountability, a lot of people jump to negative, but I think it's also a positive feature as well. So having those one-on-ones regularly. I think that's a key element to a high-performing team and a high-performing individual as well. And when they know it's coming, they know they're going to want to get it all done and get all those boxes checked before they meet with you, right? So I think those are key to driving that team. So let's do some examples though. Say you've hired someone that matches your company values. You think they're going to be great for your culture and your team. They're doing great and they start to fall off and you notice their performance is starting to become lax. How do you keep them and yourself accountable? What are you doing to ensure that we get this employee back on track? So I'm going to start with Joanna.
That one's a tough one. It really is. And I think you have to initially start with that culture of trust, because they have to tell you what's going on. And if you don't have that, then it's kind of pointless, because they're not going to open up to you about why they're challenged, or you haven't gotten a culture of being able to take and accept criticism. I think that is super important. The other thing is, I think we're a small organization and we're very familial feeling, where we want you to succeed and we're here to support you if you're not hitting your goals. And so I think that support is felt. Now, there are times when you have to judge if that employee wants to get better. And then you have to make some tough decisions if that's the case. We're fortunate we haven't had to do that very often, but we have. And but I think we're willing to work with people if they're just going through a bad spot, or they're in a position where they don't know what to do and they need to do some brainstorming with other people within the organization in order to figure it out. I think we've all been there where we have a problem. We're like, I don't even know how to begin it. And because it's tough, it's easier for some people to avoid than address. And we have to create that culture, to make people feel comfortable, to invite others, and have a little humility to ask for help. And you got to make that a comfortable space for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Colby, anything to add to that on how to keep put an employee back on track, and what you've done in the past, or any suggestions?
Yeah, I think if somebody starts falling off, there's something wrong within either leadership or the organization. I rarely find it's within that person. People don't usually disengage unless there's a reason, and that may be in their personal life. There's a really good quote by Teddy Roosevelt that says, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." And I think that's very important. And I think within leaders, if we start to see somebody fall off, a quick phone call, not a setup one-on-one, hey, just a quick phone call. How are things going on in your life? How are you feeling? Because a lot of the times it could be something going on in their personal life that's really impacting them and they can't get their mind straight. And as a leader, that's where empathy comes in, where we say, okay, maybe we need to take a couple things off your plate. Let's realign, get them back in that space, because rarely do I find that it's something with just them. It's something that's happened within the organization, a conversation, and we need to get to the bottom of it, make sure that it's done that. Because if as leaders, we ever hear somebody say, that's not my job, we need to halt immediately and reflect to say, why would somebody get to the point where they feel that way? And I think that goes back to culture again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. And Matt, anything to add on getting an employee back on track, or what tools you use in order to keep them on track even? Yeah.
Yeah, those are two great answers. So I'll try not to repeat anything that was already said. But yeah, for us, it's really like trying to get to the root cause. If we're accepting that this person was a cultural or core values fit, and we're not going to question that, like Colby said, it's often, well, almost obviously, right? There's obviously some external thing that's happening, whether it's in their life or something that happened in the company, or maybe there's a resource that they don't have. For us, we're growing very rapidly. So a person that's great fit for a role today may not be a great fit for that role in 2 years if they have trouble kind of growing and scaling with the business. And I see it as my job to help people stay ahead of that curve. For us, that has kind of been the most common thing. But yeah, I think kind of just circling back to the trust thing, the ability to have an open, honest kind of line of communication allows you to pick up the phone, like Colby said, and have that, hey, is everything okay type of conversation. And we try and do that quickly if possible.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. So Now we're going to turn to the audience and ask you to provide any questions you'd like our panelists to answer. This is the great opportunity. You can put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A, because really, if you're wanting to have the alignment, the culture, the accountability, all those things that we've talked about, this is your time to ask their questions, and they can provide examples, feedback, anything you need to hear. So please add it to the chat or the Q&A section, and we can definitely take your questions as they come. In the meantime, while we're waiting for questions to come in, I can add a couple more. So Matt, you spoke about EOS often today, and I myself run EOS, but what was the catapult, or what led you down this path, and what suggestions would you have for other organizations in implementing this?
Yeah, so I have to be careful when I'm talking about EOS because I start to sound like an infomercial. There's nothing in it for me if anybody else uses EOS, but the catalyst for us is like I mentioned, we've been fortunate. We're growing very quickly. We're a small business, and I got to the point where it started to feel, for a while it was exciting, like organized chaos, and I kind of prided myself on that. Like we got this, and then it got to a point where it kind of continued like that, and then it just started to feel like chaos. And I think for me, the tipping point was bringing on these high caliber people to join our leadership team in the business, and being really honest with myself and saying, I'm now responsible, not just for myself and for the business and for putting food on my table, but I'm responsible for other people needing to do the same thing. We need to get really organized so that if I'm not here for a week or day or month for one reason or another, the show goes on. And so I'm fortunate to have a nice community of other entrepreneurs, and a handful of them use EOS. As far as resources, we hired a professional implementer to help us, and we meet with her quarterly, about 6 times a year, and it's been a total game changer. I'm good at trying to implement things like this myself, but I'll often try and take little pieces of it. And what I found for EOS is it's really all in is really been beneficial for us. So if anybody's looking for an implementer, I know a few that have openings, but yeah, seeking help outside has been really valuable.
Yeah, agreed. So we have a couple of questions here. So Joanna, I'm going to start with you. They put that for the person that doesn't do reviews, how do you manage pay for performance in terms of annual increases or bonuses? What's your thought process behind that?
So right, wrong, or indifferent, this is how we do it. Generally, I'm talking to my reports regularly, monthly, more than regularly. In and out. And I'm one of the folks, and most of our folks are in the office now. So I'm speaking to my folks regularly. I have 4 direct reports. Now they all have reports as well, and they're meeting with them regularly. So as far as performance goes, person should know fairly regularly how they're performing. That's a conversation that's happening on a regular basis, not once a year. We have a budget, and we let the manager decide how much of the budget they spend per person. Now, it's not a formal process. We're a small organization. Probably we should be more formal with it. It's worked for us for 70 years. So far, we haven't really deviated from that much. But that is how we do it. So we don't have a lot of people that ask a lot of questions in regards to if they made it on the higher end or they made it on the lower end. It wasn't a surprise. Now you want to obviously eliminate those that are regularly on the lower end. But we have some people that they just come in, they want to do their job. They do their job good. They're not interested in pursuing anything further. They're not interested in learning. You need those folks, and they get your baseline raise. And so it's not a surprise. Those that really push and drive, and they're rewarded for that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I think it's important what you said is they're not surprised because you
Right.
were having those conversations so regularly. They're not, they understand what's coming, right? So
Right.
that is really how you set your cadence for increases and bonuses. Pretty simplistic, right? And if it works, keep doing it, right? 70 years is a long time. I wouldn't change a thing. All right. So another question is, every team I've built was its own unique entity with its own unique challenges. What's the greatest challenge you faced in team building, and how did you overcome it? Does anybody want to offer up their example of their challenge they've overcome in team building?
I'll take the first shot, and I think I mentioned this briefly earlier. Delegating is a challenge that I have, and it's still a daily thing. My first inherent thing is I'll take it on, I'll learn it, then I'll create the job, and then hire somebody or put somebody in that position. And going back to the trust of the team, we have so many capable people within our company. Why I shouldn't neglect them from being able to grow in that position too. And a lot of them want to take these things on, because what had happened, the reason I say that is because when I did that and I always took everything on, what I noticed is our team started asking me questions. They wanted me to answer everything because I built the culture that I had to be the one to come up with the answer. And so flipping that around and saying, all right, who wants to take this on? Who's willing to take that on? That then builds the culture of people wanting to take on more and growing. So even though I haven't overcame it, because it's a consistent challenge for me and I have to kind of recheck myself every time. But I would say that that's probably one of the things, because then I end up holding the company back.
Yeah, delegation's hard from a leadership level. Matt, anything to add in a challenge you faced in team building, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I you probably won't like the answer, but I think one of the outcome, one of the biggest challenges that we've had recently is within the dynamic environment, small business rapidly growing, is people taking a job that where they didn't want the job, they wanted what they thought the job would or could become. And in our environment, it's kind of hard to predict, will that ever happen? Is it 2 years out? And kind of not having the patience there. So that ultimately we kind of identified that and parted ways. But that was a challenge too. And it kind of goes back to, I think Colby mentioned, I think Joanna mentioned it too, really defining roles and responsibilities well, and making sure that people understand when they take a job. This is what I learned from that, is making sure that a person, whether it's internal, external hire, making sure that when they take the job, they understand that they're accepting a job that is being that job, not a future job. There, of course, we always provide opportunity when it's earned, but that was a recent challenge of ours.
Joanna, anything to add on a challenge for team building?
So, for those that aren't aware, Steel Rubber Products is a family business. I'm third generation. I took over the organization as president, but having worked through it in 2020. And my father ran the organization very differently than I run it. And so it was the culture changed. Of course, he ran it for 30 years. There was a lot of concern moving to new leadership, even though they knew me, even though I've been working there for 15 years prior to this happening. And so how do you establish a team that trusts you when they have been used to the leadership of someone else for so long? And when that time came, and we did a succession for about it felt like a long time, but it was serious for about 2 years. I knew not every single person on his leadership team was going to jive well with my style. And I was just very clear about different things. And one opted out, probably the one I would have had to deal with, opt out. And so that saved me and him a lot of headache. Afterwards, I got with the team. I went and took them all to Top Golf. We bonded. And then COVID happened. Talk about bonding a leadership team like that. We really had to talk, communicate, build trust immediately. Now that was from a divine intervention in maybe a negative way, but it worked for us. And I think it was a challenge not only to leave, but it quickly got us all aligned very, very fast, because we had to. We were in emergency mode with one another. And through that, we kind of learned each other's leadership styles. They learned to trust me. We learned to make decisions together. And they realized that it was a top-down model before. Now it was going to be more collaborative. And so it was an interesting challenge to have, and we made it on the other side, thankfully. But that was probably our biggest challenge. And it would have been anyways, even if COVID hadn't happened, because we were dealing with a whole new team compared to before.
Yeah, nothing will bring you closer than a pandemic, right? So, so we talked about this a little bit, but somebody's looking for more of a solution of how to proceed for an employee struggling personally. So what's the best approach to help them have the space to deal with life while still remaining productive? That's a really big struggle for them. So what would be, if anybody wants to offer up a solution that they've used or would suggest?
But my person best space to do
If I'm understanding this question, I'm not sure if I quite fully understand the question that's laid out, but obviously growing in different directions could be a couple different things. Again, as a leader, I think this is where we have to be close to our people. Obviously, we can't be close to every employee, depending on the size, especially with the polling. Most of them are over 100 employees, but I think, and that goes back, in my opinion, to Matt's question, where people see Built Right in 10 years. Do they see themselves part of that organization in 10 years? Do they see themselves helping Matt and team grow that company? And I think that's something that we need to know where our people want to grow, because that may impact where we invest in them to grow in the company as well. So empathy and sympathy within an organization. If a great book, a lot of people know Jocko Willink from Extreme Ownership, but he had another book called The Dichotomy of Leadership. And I can't recommend this book anymore, because it really shows as leaders how we have a line to toe in both being empathetic with our people, but then also holding them accountable. So I love that book. I don't know if that helps the question, but that's a great recommendation on my part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think that was a great answer, Colby. If the employee is actually struggling personally, like maybe they have something in their personal life that they're struggling with, how do we, as leaders, we want to make sure that they remain productive and they keep doing, their job and supporting the organization, but how do we remain really just understanding and what can we do to support them there?
I guess just to add to that, I don't want to take up the whole time, but there was a great analogy somebody told me years ago, and it's a step for one person may be a leap for another. And sometimes when somebody's struggling personally, I've gotten in the dark space, and I can't imagine that the other panelists haven't, where everything just seems monumental. Every task seems monumental. And sometimes it's getting those small wins to kind of start building up. And to me personally, if I had somebody who is struggling personally, even if it's just sitting down, they may not want to talk, by having a one-on-one real conversation, person to person, not necessarily boss down conversation, understand where they're struggling personally, and then maybe throw out some small carrots out there that are the small wins. If anything, if they're struggling personally, those wins may make them feel better, because if somebody's struggling personally, generally they don't feel very good about themselves. And I think as leaders, it's important for us to help our people be successful. And in my opinion, I would come out, try to find a couple small wins that they could get under their belt that may kind of help drive them.
Mm-hmm. Matt, anything to add there?
I think I think a lot of the answer to this is pretty unique to each individual situation. I think Colby hit it pretty well. I don't have the answer. I would love it if somebody did. I think though Colby kind of touched on something that we would do here is having that trust and having that open line of communication. I think if it really seems like it's a personal problem and not an issue with the job or with work, I like to have that conversation sometimes off site. Kind of like Colby said, break down those walls, go get a sandwich, get coffee, go for a walk, whatever it is. Not across a desk or a conference room table, or not in an environment where that person might be uncomfortable talking about those things, or even appearing to have that conversation from a distance. So that's just kind of one of those little things that we do here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And probably our last question for team building, and for the entire webinar here, are you finding remote employees want to stay remote? If so, how are you managing those? And can that be an advantage or disadvantage? Does anyone want to offer their insight there?
It's complicated. We're still dealing with it, honestly, to be fair. So we're a manufacturing facility. So I had all those essential employees that never could work from home. And they all saw that as all these people get to be at home, but I can't be at home. Well, you can't take your press with you to the house. This is not how this works. You can't ship packages from your house.
Right.
So it's tough, because once flexibility has been introduced, it's very hard to bring it back. And so what we have done is create a hybrid environment where the employees can work partially from home for a few days a week. They can work, but we need them in the office for a bit. So far, we haven't had complaints with it. The challenge has been with work from home is how do you become part of the culture of the organization, or how do you keep that going when you've got other employees that are here every day? How does it work for onboarding new employees? Because part of the training is not only the mechanical thing of what you do, but say for customer service is hearing how other people answer a question. It's overhearing another conversation. It's building camaraderie with one another. And I'll be honest, the employees that we hired during COVID that were completely work from home, and maybe this is just our culture, they didn't stay. They didn't stay. And I think some of that is because they didn't build relationships with the people they work for. One of the things they say about millennials, and I don't know if any of you guys are, but is that they like to work with the people that are their friends. They like to have relationships with those. I mean, they're spending 8 hours a day with those people, sometimes more. And so when you never get to build that, it's hard. Now, I will say our customer service department has done a pretty good job of being on teams with each other throughout the day, throwing little jokes and interacting with each other throughout the day. I, however, have not really gotten to know them because I come into the office until they started coming into the office, because I am not on their chat. And I run the company and I hardly know the names of them. So this is a problem. This is a problem. And most of the other staff don't know who they are. When you're a small company and people are used to running into each other all day and all of a sudden now they're not. So for us, the way we had that solution is we had to bring them in a couple of days a week. We also have all staff fun things that we do. I just took the entire company bowling for Christmas. So we did stuff like that. We do to celebrate boat safety. We did a rain gutter regatta and everybody came in for that stuff. We do a forklift rodeo to celebrate forklift safety. I mean, things that at least they can interact, have some fellowship with one another. It's on our dime. We're paying for the lunch hour. We're bringing in sandwiches. But we've had to do that in order to keep the culture. The other thing that's been hard is you just don't have those spontaneous conversations that are like, I was thinking as you see someone walk by. And so that's why we've decided to deal with it in a hybrid nature, not completely taking away flexibility, but recognizing that there's some value to coming into the office still and interacting with the employees that have to be on site.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you. I think that was very helpful. With the 2-minute countdown, Matt or Colby, do you have anything to add to managing remote employees with an advantage or a disadvantage there?
We have team members in, I'll be quick. We have team members in California and Florida, but none of them were kind of local and then moved remote. So I have got a lot of thoughts on remote employees, but I don't think I can specifically answer that question.
Okay. Colby?
I was just going to say it's a reality for us. We've got staff in 11 different states between sales staff. And so it is a challenge. Again, that's why I say Slack is so important, in my opinion. It keeps accountability throughout the day. And then what we've talked about, having clear and concise KPIs that you manage to, because then you can then judge bandwidth and how effective you're being.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you to our panelists today for your time and education. We really appreciate it. I think we can all say we're walking away with knowledge and a checklist of how to improve our teams and organization. Listed below and what you can see here is our contact information. Feel free to email our panelists or myself with any questions further on this topic. We'd be happy to connect with you also on LinkedIn. Thank you everyone for participation, your time, and attending. We really hope you enjoyed this session as much as we did. Stay up to date on all the committee education series by following on all social media platforms, and stay tuned for the next SEMA education session. And everybody have a great day. Thank you to the panelists.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.